Somewhere around the age of 30, 40, 50, and 60, a quiet question tends to creep in. Is my pension where it should be? There's no single right answer because everyone's situation is different. But there is a commonly used rule of thumb that gives a rough sense of direction, and today we're breaking it down, age by age. Pensions rarely come with a scoreboard. There's no dashboard flashing amber or green, so it's easy to reach 40 or 50 with only a vague sense of whether things are heading in the right direction. That's exactly why a simple age-based guide can be so useful. Not as a verdict, but as a compass to check progress against. Every pound contributed in your 20s or 30s has decades left to grow before it's ever touched. That long runway means investment growth has more time to compound on itself, turning modest early contributions into a much bigger share of the eventual pot. Starting a little later isn't fatal, but it usually means working harder to catch up. One popular guide, often cited by pension providers, suggests aiming for roughly 1 times salary saved by 30, 2 to 3 times by 40, 4 to 6 times by 50, and around 7 to 8 times by the time retirement age arrives. These are broad benchmarks, not guarantees, and personal circumstances can push the sensible figure higher or lower. To make this less abstract, let's apply the guide to someone earning an illustrative £35,000 a year. This is just an example to show the mechanics, not a target for every reader, since real salaries and needs vary enormously. Here's roughly what each milestone might look like on that income. On this guide, by age 30, the rough marker is around 1 times annual salary. So on our illustrative £35,000 example, that's about £35,000 saved. Reaching this isn't about perfection this early, it's simply a checkpoint showing contributions are building at a reasonable pace. By 40, the same guide points to somewhere between 2 and 3 times salary, which on our example works out to roughly £87,500. Pay rises, career breaks, and different priorities all shift this in reality, so it's read as a rough zone rather than a precise line to hit. At 50, the commonly cited range moves up to 4 to 6 times salary, landing around £175,000 on our illustrative example. This decade often carries the biggest pension boost, as mortgages ease and earnings tend to peak for many people. Picture 2 savers, both putting away £200 a month, one starting at 25 and one at 35. Assuming an illustrative 5% growth rate, which is never guaranteed and comes with capital at risk, that extra 10 years at the start can make a dramatically larger difference than the extra decade of contributions at the end. The gap between those 2 savers isn't mainly down to the extra money paid in, it's down to growth compounding on growth for longer. Each year's returns have more previous year's returns sitting underneath them, so the earliest contributions often end up doing proportionally more work than money added later on. That leaves one more milestone to cover, the marker often cited for retirement age itself, along with a more useful question for anyone who feels behind on these numbers. Because falling short of a rule of thumb at any age is common, and there are practical, well-known levers that can help close the gap. Falling short of the rule of thumb at a given age isn't a crisis, it's simply information. Pensions are marathons, not sprints, and there are several practical levers that can close a gap over time. The next few points cover exactly that, starting with the simplest one of all. One of the easiest levers is raising the contribution rate gradually, often by just 1% at a time. Doing this alongside a pay rise means the extra money is barely felt in take-home pay, yet it compounds for decades inside the pension. Many workplace schemes let this be set up once and then increased automatically each year. Employer matching is often described as free money, and it's one of the highest value things in personal finance. On an illustrative £35,000 salary, a typical 4% match could add roughly this much extra into the pension each year, on top of whatever's personally contributed. Missing the full match effectively means turning down part of the pay package. Salary sacrifice is a scheme where pension contributions are taken from salary before tax and national insurance are applied, which can reduce deductions while the same amount or more goes into the pension. It doesn't change the underlying rule of thumb, but it can make reaching it slightly more efficient. Whether it's offered is worth checking with a payslip or HR team, since not every employer runs one. Working a little longer than originally planned is one of the most underrated levers there is. A few extra years mean more contributions going in, fewer years for the pot to be drawn down, and more time for growth to keep compounding. Even a couple of years' delay to retirement can meaningfully change the final outcome for someone who started saving late. A surprisingly common mistake is simply losing track of old workplace pensions after changing jobs a few times. Small pots from years ago can add up to a meaningful sum, but only if they're found. The government's pension tracing service exists specifically for this, and it's free to use. Another frequent slip is being overly cautious with investment choices too early in a career. With decades until retirement, a very conservative default fund may quietly hold back growth that would otherwise help close a gap. Investment choices always carry risk, and returns are never guaranteed. But risk levels are usually meant to match the time horizon involved. Pausing contributions during a career break, a house purchase, or a rough financial patch is understandable. But it's often the moment compounding gets interrupted the most. Even dropping to a smaller contribution, rather than stopping completely, can preserve much of the momentum. Restarting later at the same rate never quite makes up for the years lost. It's worth remembering that every multiple mentioned in this video is a widely used guide, not a personal target set in stone. Real circumstances, from career breaks to different retirement ages, will always move the numbers around. Checking a pension dashboard or the current figures on gov.uk is the best way to see where things genuinely stand. None of this requires a dramatic overhaul overnight. A slightly higher contribution rate, a captured employer match, and a few more years of consistency can quietly reshape a retirement decades from now. The version of anyone 30 years older will likely be grateful for whatever gets started today. That's pension milestones by age covered, from the early 20s right through to 60 and beyond. If this helped make the numbers feel a little less daunting, subscribing means never missing the next deep dive into UK personal finance. Thanks so much for watching, and see you in the next one.